Good morning. So I'm going to continue with Tractum's book, Bright Virtue, Original Innocence, and we're at a little chapter called Do Not Relax. So let's see. Okay, we start with a few quotes. Listen, fortunate one. Now that that your spiritual connection has been forged, achieve your eternal goals. Strive on the soul path of all the victorious one's heirs. Generate compassion and the mind of awakening. This is from Jujum Rinpoche. And then from Idris Shah, from the book Learning How to Learn. It is not a question of where you go or whether you join a group. It's a question of whether you've been correctly prepared to learn how to learn. Many things are necessary for observing. Next quote. It's from Gurdjieff. Many things are necessary for observing. The first is sincerity with oneself. This is very difficult. We try not to see ourselves because we fear we shall suffer remorse of conscience. There are many dirty dogs in us, and we do not want to see them. Gurdjieff, yeah. So here's the chapter, Do Not Relax. There's nothing relaxing at all about Buddha's teaching. Buddha did not want you to relax, anything but. These days, there's a lot of talk of meditation for relaxation. Well, that is nice, and it is lovely for people to relax. They need to due to their inherent stress of samsara. But if you meditate to relax, it has nothing whatsoever to do with Buddha's teachings or the deep of the spiritual path. Frankly, you're better off going to a spa or a baseball game or having sex or playing backgammon, seeing a movie. You'll get more bang for your buck in almost any of these. If you understand the first noble truth, then you will feel deep dissatisfaction, and this dissatisfaction will not allow you to relax. Frankly, you don't need to. It's not stress that makes you unhealthy, it is meaningless stress. Many people who feel connected to a great cause will work tirelessly to accomplish it, day and night, lose sleep, eat poorly under stress, and yet they are radiant and, in a relative sense, happier than most. Why? Because it's not stress, but meaninglessness that crushes the human spirit. Buddha said he was like a man who's walking down the street and sees a house on fire. Inside the house, he knows there's a family fast asleep. They're about to die in their sleep. Buddha begins to shout and bang on the door to wake them up. He does not want them to wake up to their condition and then chill out, relax, try to soothe themselves. He wants them to wake up and experience the dread, what Gurdjieff called the terror of the situation. They wake up, they smell the smoke, they feel the heat, they realize their house is on fire, and their children are in immediate danger of dying a horrible death. This is not a relaxing situation. They work to do whatever they can to escape. The night Buddha left home and family to engage the spiritual quest, he stood in the doorway of his wife's room looking at her and his newborn baby asleep. He loved them deeply, profoundly. He was not able to abandon them because he did not care for them, but because he loved them so much, and he realized they would experience sickness, old age, death, alienation, and all the sufferings that all human beings experience. He felt deep in the intuition of his human maturity that there was another option. He could not be satisfied with any shallow consolation sold by society or experience, even those of a prince. Imagine how he must have felt knowing his wife and child would feel abandoned. Yes, he expected to return with the teachings that bring an end to suffering. If he was right, if he was right. But in the meantime, they would feel hurt, abandoned, angry, betrayed. Standing there, he must have been anything but relaxed. True spiritual aspirants are able to take into themselves the great turmoils of the human existential condition. They become an alchemical cauldron which can cook the stresses, tensions, facts of human experience. The all good mother whispers in our ear, and her whisper causes the great dissatisfaction that cannot be quenched by anything in samsara. Marcuse and the Buddha, the great refusal. Here comes a quote from Marcuse. How can the administered individuals who have made their mutilation into their own liberties and satisfaction liberate themselves as well as from their masters? How is it even thinkable that the vicious cycle be broken? Marcuse from One Dimensional Man. So if you have the intuition of what is talked about in part 1, original innocence, bright virtue, the child, luminous blazing, and you are not so pretentious as to convince yourself you have already understood, then you will be burning with dissatisfaction. You will feel happy that there was someone like the Buddha who had the courage to say it, to say, there's something fundamentally wrong with this whole game. The structure of experience and being in duality with its birth, death, separations, sufferings, and also with the forms society and oneself have given to manage it. Bravo! Now you can join the great refusal. Herbert Marcuse, a philosopher, wrote about the great refusal in his 1964 book One Dimensional Man, a book whose insights into the oppressive mechanisms of consumerist culture are more to the point now than ever. Belief in the reality of the separate subjectivity is the root of the problem. Buddha resolved. Buddha resolved, but it is also where we must work, for it is us. The all-good mother whispers in our ear, and her whisper causes the great dissatisfaction that cannot be quenched by anything in samsara. The creation of a subjectivity which refuses to participate in its own oppression is the starting point of the path. Right? Samsara, life in delusion, is a rigged game. It cannot work in terms of an end to suffering. This is obvious to anyone who looks with real care, and is why Freud said the best human beings can do is go from neurotic misery to normal unhappiness. In the realm of death and separation, in the realm of alternating gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, hope and fear, birth and death, in the realm where one thing eats another to survive, there's no living without anxiety. And living without anxiety is exactly what the deep of the human longs for. Mercuse's efforts to a solution failed. In the end, bound by the facts of the realm whose structure he could not transcend, his hope and fear led to bitterness. His longing for freedom and the lack of society achieving that freedom led him to develop angry systems of doublespeak where he espoused repressive tolerance, sanctioning maltreatment of those who disagree with one. An ends justify the means, foundation for revolutionary and psychoanalytic inquisitions. Sadly, this is common. The ideals of communism turn into the disasters of Stalin, Pol Pot, Pol Pot's Cambodian killing fields, and the failed promises of autocrats and dictators of the right and left everywhere. Those who promise us paradise on earth never produced anything but a hell. That's a quote from Karl Popper, quoted in In Passing, Condolences and Complaints on Death, Dying and Related Disappointments. By John Winokur. Buddha's great refusal was truly radical, a word meaning to go to root. So radical is a word meaning to go to root. Buddha went to the root of the problem of suffering. And the root is not in society and government, in your childhood, in alien conspiracies, and its solution is not in harmonic convergences, political revolutions, psychoanalysis, dolphin swimming, drug experiences, spiritual visions, religious dogmas, technical exercises, or any experience at all. It is in understanding the very structure of perception and experience. If you embrace Buddha's first noble truth, then you will separate yourself from the fad of consumerism, worldly or spiritual. You will sever your relationship with the game of spiritual materialism. Thus, self-deception always manifests itself in terms of trying to create or recreate a dream world, the nostalgia of the dream experience. And the opposite of self-deception is just working with the facts of life. Chogyam Trungpa. This last was a quote. Marcuse spoke very directly to the fashion in which rich materialist culture uses endless streams of commodities as a means of oppression, a means of numbing oneself and the culture to the realities of social, psychological, and political life. Trungpa Rinpoche spoke very directly to the way in which spiritual materialism, taking refuge in any state or meditational drug-induced manufactured by spiritual techniques, hyped up blisses, emotional reveries, serve to numb one from the true process of spiritual life, and actually increase suffering and the frustrations of grasping to alternating experience. Spiritual materialism dominates in a consumerist culture. Marcuse spoke strongly about the unfreedoms of consumerist culture, about the overarching domination of the human psyche by manufactured needs and wants. A quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj: "You will receive everything you need when you stop asking for what you do not need." Marcuse predicted that increasingly corporate interest, spoon-fed through ever-increasingly subtle forms of advertising, would undermine authentic questioning and even the ability to rebel, much like the drugged citizens consuming soma in Huxley's social critique novel Brave New World. A similar scenario is seen in the Twinkie mentality of internet spirituality. Ceaseless cutesy affirmations of and assurances are aggressively spoon-fed an eager audience. We are assured that Buddha didn't mean that human experience was actually flawed, that all of it was tinged by suffering. We are comforted that there is a cure and fix to make samsara work, or the tantras are quoted in Twinkie fashion, samsara is nirvana, but without any real understanding of what this means. I'm reminded of a story. One day Buddha was teaching on truth, and a man in the back sat quietly listening carefully. The next day, as Buddha walked with Ananda, they passed a village where the same man was expounding the very words of the Buddha. Suddenly the Buddha spoke loudly and said, "Liar, liar." The man was shocked and replied, "I'm only saying exactly what you taught yesterday." The Buddha said, "Yes, and when I said it, it came from my experience and was made truth by that experience. But as you have no such experience, your intentions are quite different. You are a liar." All this twinky spirituality with its endless reassurances, affirmations, smiley faces, and hearts is nothing other than the advertising of samsara. Those who offer it up mean well in their confusions and delusions, but only serve the purposes of unfreedom. Pseudo Dzogchen and Advaitic teachings that emphasize that everything is already Buddha or perfect misrepresent the teachings of original innocence and bright virtue to bolster the unfreedom of complacency. Buddha's teaching is not meant to make you feel comfortable. Buddha's teaching is not meant to make you relax. There's nothing so disturbing to the construct of delusion as the first noble truth, and that is why pretty much everyone works to reframe it as something other than what it is. There's nothing marketable about it. In the Padana Sutra, Buddha speaks to Mara, the god of delusion. That army of yours, that the world with its devas can't overcome, I will smash it with discernment. I will go about from kingdom to kingdom, training my many disciples, and they, heedful, resolute, practicing my teachings, despite your wishes, will go where, having gone, there is no grief. Be dissatisfied. The world warrants it. Even be depressed. This realm is depressing. Happily, when one has seen the terror of the situation, when one has felt the hopelessness of all strategies within samsara, the first two noble truths, one, there is suffering, and two, there is a cause of suffering, are followed by the third, there's an end to suffering, and fourth, there's a path to that end. If there was only the mechanicalness of delusion churning through in as appearance, if it were 100%, that would justify nihilism. But happily there is something else. The whisper of the all-good mother does not invite us to some variation on human life, but to a radical alternative. When Buddha was asked if he was a man, he categorically said no. When he was asked if he was a god or demon, he replied no. When asked what he was, he said awake. The alternative of true spiritual life is not a human alternative. The human alternative is contained within that which is reality, but reality is not contained within the human alternative. You are not asked to be something other than human in your body, mind, feelings, this content of your consciousness, but you are required to discover something far beyond human as the context of these. And here comes a quote. Today, tomorrow, another day our parents and friends will die. Our lovers will die. Our lamas will die. Our possessions will scatter and be enjoyed by others. Our own aggregates will fall apart. Today, this evening, tonight, soon all I cling to will be lost. This is a quote from Longchenpa. Have a great day.